What is going on, YouTube? It's your boy Spanko, and today I'm excited. One, because I'm finally done exams so I can get back to making content. But two, because I have a Yosenju Kaiju deck profile which I haven't updated in a long time. And this is one of those decks that was been along with the channel for a very long time. One of my very favorite decks when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think this low-key can catch a lot of people off guard. So I think this deck can actually be pretty competitive. Now, today is a competitive build of the deck. However, if you guys want to see a budget version, let me know in the comment section down below, and then I can maybe do a budget version for you guys. So if you guys do enjoy these videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. Guys, we're almost at 4,500 subscribers. I feel like we can make 4,500 happen soon. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and now off to the video. Okay, so to start off the deck profile, we are starting off with triple, comma 1, triple Yosenju, 2, triple, 3, as well as double Yosenju Sujic. Now, if you guys have watched any of my Yosenju deck profiles in the past, this is the lineup that I stick with. I don't play the new support, I don't play the pendulum stuff. These are competitively and objectively just the best Yosenjus to play, and that's why I play all of them. Just for a quick rundown, Yosenju, 1 bounces a card back to your opponent's hand. 2 attacks directly, which isn't the greatest effect, but this card is just the biggest attack Yosenju, and it comes up because it has the other effect that's going to be really important later. And then Yosenju, 3 searches a card when you do battle damage. Yosenju Sujic kind of acts as like an honest in your hand, but also if it's on the field, you can target another Yosenju to boost its attack by 1,000. That's obviously very relevant, especially in a deck like this, which I'm going to mention right now real quick. It wants to go second, it wants to break boards, and it wants to OTK. That's what this deck wants to do. So the reason these Yosenjus are just the best ones, which I want to get into, is because all of them have the same effect where when they're normal summoned, you can summon another column monster from your hand that's not the same one. So comma 1 can summon comma 2, comma 2 can summon comma 3, comma 2 can also summon comma 1. So there's just a lot of things where you can help spam the board with these Yosenju monsters. Also at the end phase, they all share the same effect where they come back to your hand, so they're kind of like spirit monsters in that sense. And that's really important because this deck has a lot of synergy with other cards, which I'm going to get into once we get further down with the video. But this deck, the synergy and the way a lot of things work together, and the way you have so many different win conditions with this is actually kind of insane low-key. So then for the Kaijus, we are playing triple Gamma Seal. I'm just playing the lowest attack Kaiju. So triple Gamma Seal, 2 Humongous. 5 Kaijus is enough, I think. I don't think you want to play more than 5 Kaijus, only because opening 2 Kaijus isn't bad, but opening 3 Kaijus is horrible. You never want to open 3 Kaijus. So that's why you want to play 5. I think 5 is a perfect number. Opening 1 is really the optimal thing. Opening 2 is, again, not bad, but opening 1 is just the most optimal. I think 5 is perfect. And then we are playing a bunch of hand traps, right? So obviously Kaijus, I want to mention real quick, gets rid of any problematic monsters your opponent has. Something like Dragoon, something like a Savage. Anything your opponent has, like Herald, could be pretty problematic as well. So anything that your opponent has that you just don't think you can out, and this just the answer to all of it. So yeah, that's why obviously you're playing the Kaijus in this. And then we are playing a bunch of hand traps. Now these hand traps, in a lot of ways outside of the Ash, which I'm going to talk about, are very synergistic with this deck, and they're picked specifically for this deck. First thing, we're starting off with Ash. Ash is just the most generic, that's why we're playing 3 of it. It hits any deck, and also I don't think in today's metagame, 1 Ash is just going to cause my opponent to stop playing. Now, I do want to mention that it is really important that your opponent has a board, because if you think about it, if my opponent passes with nothing on the field, like no monsters, all your Kaijus become dead. Your Nibiru's are dead. So you don't want to ever stop your opponent from making a board. You really want your opponent to make a minimal board, and that's what these hand traps want to do, is try to stop your opponent from making like a full combo or full board. And if they have that minimal board, then you can proceed to break it and OTK. So obviously the Kaijus are going to let you do that, the Ash is going to let you do that, Nibiru is going to let you do that as well. Now you guys might be thinking, but wait, Spanko, Nibiru destroys my opponent's entire field, like it gets rid of my opponent's board. Yes, but Nibiru puts a token on the field, which is going to be very, very important later. But the reason Nibiru is really good, again, because all the Yosenju monsters come back to your hand on the end phase. So in no situation are you ever going to be Nibiruing and losing your own monsters, really, unless you have like a Kaiju on the field. So that's why Nibiru specifically has a lot of synergy with this deck, but there's more synergy that it actually has, but we'll explain it when we get there. But yeah, triple Nibiru, of course. Triple Gamma. Gamma, objectively, I think is one of the best hand traps in the game. The problem with Gamma is in a lot of decks, it becomes kind of dead once you commit a monster to the board. Again, with the Yosenjus, the best part is they all come back to your hand, so Gamma is pretty much always going to be live. One more thing I actually wanted to say about the Yosenjus that I just completely forgot is comma 1 can bounce a Kaiju. People tend to forget that. So if I Kaiju my opponent and I have a comma 1, I can bounce the Kaiju back to my hand and Kaiju my opponent again. This is why it's so low-key good, like the synergy in this deck is just the way it all meshes together. People don't realize, but it can actually low-key be really, really good. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, Gamma, again, is just one of the best hand traps in the game, in my opinion. Then we are playing triple Imperm. Now, I do want to say this about Imperm. When you are playing this deck, I just want to give you guys, I guess, some advice. But if you guys do want to play this deck, don't just shotgun an Imperm. The reason Imperm is really good in this deck is because when you are going second, you can actually activate the Imperm to negate one of your opponent's monsters effect, and that's really good. A lot of the times I see people just like, okay, I'm gonna normal summon like Stratos. I'm just gonna say Stratos out of nowhere, and I'm gonna go like Imperm, boom, right away. If my opponent has extenders in their hand, that Imperm doesn't matter. The reason Imperm is really good in this deck is because, again, you really want to have your opponent make the board, but you want to be able to break it. You don't want to necessarily stop. So unless there's a situation where I see that I'm like, if I Imperm right here, he is going to pass, he or she, my opponent, is going to pass with just that card on the field, and that's it. Unless there's that situation, hold the Imperm. Just hold the Imperm. Because your opponent can make a Savage Dragon, your opponent can make an Apollo, whatever it is. You want to Imperm that problem card. You don't want to Imperm what gets them to that problem card, if that makes sense, okay? So you want to out the problem. You don't want to out anything, or you don't want to attempt to out anything before it gets there, because if your opponent does have extenders, then your Imperm is pretty much lost, you've done nothing. So that's just one way I like to play Imperm in this deck specifically. Then we are playing Triple Tenki, of course. Tenki searches any of your Yosenju comments, so obviously the Tenkis. Then you are playing Triple Extravagance. You don't draw a lot in this deck. Actually, you don't draw at all in this deck, so Extravagance is really good. Also, your extra deck is not that important outside of a few cards, so you can just max out on those few cards, and then obviously draw 2 is really good. It also gets you hand advantage, which is really important in this deck. Now, I should mention that actually, since we just talked about Imperm, that's the reason why I don't play Forbidden Droplet in this deck. So the reason I don't play Droplet is because Droplet requires too many cards from hands, and don't get me wrong, Droplet's an insane card, and in the right decks is a broken card. The thing is with Yosenju is you want as many Yosenju monsters in your hand as possible at all times. You want as many cards in your hand as possible at all times. And when you droplets, think about it. If I'm going second, I have 6 cards in my hand, and I droplets for, like, let's say spell and monster, I gotta get rid of 2 cards. Plus, I'm getting rid of the droplets. So that's 3 cards I'm getting rid of. And now I'm effectively playing with 3 cards. Now, unless somehow I know I can OTK with 3 cards, that's not really that good, and it's not really that consistent. So that's why I just like to play the Imperm. We don't play the droplets in this deck. And then we are playing Triple Lightning Storm as well as 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, specifically for back row matchups. Now, you guys might be thinking, okay, Spanko, you just said that you want your opponent to have some kind of board, some kind of monsters. Why the Lightning Storm? Keep in mind that your opponent is sometimes going to put up, actually most of the time, going to put up a negate, right? And a lot of the time, if you have Lightning Storm as your 6th card or a card in your hand, you can Lightning Storm. Your opponent is going to be forced to stop that card. What's really good is that if you don't have a Kaiju in that hand, or if you don't have something to break your opponent's board in that hand, you need something to get rid of that negate so that you can continue playing, right? And again, Harpy's Feather Duster against back row is obviously very important. We don't play a lot of we don't play any back row removal here. It's mostly just monster hate, so that's why obviously we're playing Lightning Storm the Duster. And then 1 Double or Nothing. This is one of your main win conditions in this deck. You can get to it all the time, and this is just so good in this deck specifically because you can make rank 4 super easily in this deck. Then moving on to the extra deck, we are playing Triple Utopia Double as well as Triple Utopia. I just mentioned the Double or Nothing, of course, is one of your main win conditions. And the nice thing I like about this deck is it doesn't have 1 win condition. Now, Utopia Double Utopia is one of your best win conditions in this deck, but it's not the only one you can go into. We are also playing Double Zeus. Of course, if you don't end up OTKing your opponent, it's really easy to make Zeus in this deck. So trust me, I get this deck is expensive, like I mentioned earlier. If you guys want to see a budget profile, let me know in the comments. I can make a budget profile happen. But yeah, so that's why we're playing the Zeus as well as there. Now we're playing the Cowboy. Now, okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about. So the reason Cowboy is so important is because let's say you Kaiju your opponent. So you have a Gamma Seal, boom, you Kaiju your opponent. You have 2 Yosenju monsters in your hand. Okay, you comma 1, comma 2, whatever it is. Then you make Utopia Double, you search your Double or Nothing, and you have your Utopia. The thing is, okay, you're not really going to OTK your opponent because Utopia is only going to have 10,000 attack. I mean, I just said only 10,000 attack, but it's going to have 10,000 attack. It cannot attack directly though, which means you're going to have to attack into the Kaiju. Now, the thing is, you're only going to be doing 7,800 damage if you attack into a Gamma Seal, 7,600 if you're attacking into Humongous. So you're not going to be OTKing with your opponent with just the Utopia. Now, imagine you had 4 Yosenjus. Okay, you have 4 Yosenjus in your hand. You make Utopia Double, you make Cowboy. You attack over a Kaiju, and then you Cowboy for game. Like, Cowboy, I know it sounds mean. Guys, I understand it sounds mean, but Cowboy for game is so real in this deck, and it happens so often. Now, it's not even just the Utopia play you can do that. You have to keep in mind that if you have a bunch of Yosenju Kamas on the board, or just Yosenjus in general on the board, right, okay, and you do a lot of chip damage, keep in mind that Kama 1 is 1,600, here's an 1,800, here's 1,500. So let's say you have a Sujik as well, which boosts it by 1,000. You can get your opponent low enough a lot of times with just the Yosenju monsters. You don't even need to go into your extra deck at all. You just attack with the Yosenju monsters, and then Cowboy for game. There's so many situations where Cowboy for game is just so real in this deck. Then we're playing the obligatory Omega, of course, for the Gamma, 1 Berserker. The reason we're playing Berserker is because it's still relevant with the Gamma, and so if I do Extravagance, banish Omega, I can make this instead. If I banish this, then obviously I make Omega. Then this card again. Sounds mean. I understand, sounds mean. But It's very relevant, and here's one of the main synergies with this. This card is so good because let's say you activate Nibiru and you give your opponent a Nibiru token, okay? So there's two ways it can go. The Nibiru token could have low attack, let's say, and you can just out it with the Utopia and you can just OTK them with Utopia. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. Okay, we get it. That's normal. But a lot of the time, especially in today's format, you Nibiru and that monster doesn't have that much defense. Because if you're Nibiruing, a lot of the time they're going to have Link monsters on the board, which of course count as 0 defense. So if you put a Nibiru token in defense position, and you can make a Pentastag. Remember how I just mentioned the Utopia plus the Gaga Cowboy thing where you attack and you Cowboy for game? Well, obviously you can't do damage if your opponent's monster's in defense position with the Utopia, but if you have the Pentastag, you have piercing damage, so you don't have to go into Cowboy, you can go into Pentastag and then do 10k directly to your opponent. Now, of course, if you guys don't know, the Utopia double stops you from attacking directly, which is why you always want to have a monster on the side of the field. That's what I was mentioning earlier, you always want your opponent to have a monster, because that's just how you OTK. But it's just one of those things where now you have different options of OTKing with the Pentastag, right? I know, again, I get it sounds mean, but it's actually very relevant in this deck. And then we are playing just one Lambda. It doesn't come up too often. Sometimes you have a Nibiru and like a Kaiju on your side of the field, and then you can just make a Lambda. It doesn't come up too often. If you have a Gamma in your hand, I can see that happening. And then one Borosword Dragon. This one's also really good because if you end up banishing a lot of these other cards, or banishing triple Utopia or triple double, let's say, right? Then what ends up happening is you can just make the Borosword with like 4 Yosenju Kamas, and then let's say you have a Nibiru on your side of the field from earlier, or you have a Kaiju that you summon on your opponents, but you have a second one you can summon yourself, that just helps you OTK. So Borosword just helps you OTK in that sense. Again, it's a lot better than Access Code in this situation because you're not playing a lot of Link monsters in this deck, of course. So yeah, Borosword is just really, really good in this deck. So one thing I just wanted to mention about this deck that I want to bring up just before we end the deck profile is that this deck low-key can catch a lot of people off guard. And the reason I say that is because people in today's metagame, or just in general in today's metagame, right? A lot of the best hand traps and a lot of the best side deck cards are not good against this deck. So think about it. Lancia is really good. Okay, Lancia doesn't mean anything here. Okay, Droll Unlock is really good. Okay, Droll Unlock really doesn't mean anything here. Right, of course you can Droll after Extravagance, I guess, right? And if I have a comma 3 sucks, but you know what I mean, just generally, like, you're not, or you can Droll after a Tanky as well, technically, right? But it's not like, oh, I'm gonna lose because of a Droll, right? Droll, Lancia is really good. DD Crow, again, DD Crow doesn't matter. Cycle Reader, of course, doesn't matter. Back Row Hate, which a lot of people side, doesn't matter. So, like, this deck, what this deck does, and that I think can catch a lot of people off guard, and why I think you can go to a local tournament, even maybe a regional size tournament, and actually do decently well with this deck. I know it sounds like a joke, but I'm being dead serious, is because you're playing a bunch of the best hand traps against the meta in today's game, but you also don't lose to any of those traps or hand traps that the other meta decks would lose to. So if everyone is siding to beat the meta, this is a very anti-meta deck actually in a lot of ways, because if everyone's siding to beat the meta, but those side deck cards don't do anything good. Even Ash, okay? Like, even something as simple as an Ash. What in this deck are you going to Ash Blossom that's going to make a big impact? A Tanky? An Extrav? Like, if I open a couple Yosenjus and a couple Kaijus or a hand trap, like, you're not beating me. And you always want to go second, so you're always going to have a 6 card in your hand. That's why this deck, it's just one of those things where I'm not trying to say this deck is going to be the best deck in the game. I'm not trying to say this is going to... What I'm just trying to say is that, low-key, this will catch a lot of people off guard. And if you go to a locals with this and they don't have the correct cards to side, this deck could, like, low-key just win you a bunch of games, and people won't see it coming. So that is it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really went into depth with this because I wanted you guys to understand why I decided to play what I wanted to play and what makes this deck competitively viable and all the different synergies and all the different things that this deck does really well. I understand that this is not going to be the best deck of the format. I'm not trying to say that it's going to be crazy, but I am definitely trying to say that if you guys want to take this to a locals or even a regional size event, you can low-key pretty much do really well with this deck, and people won't see it coming. So it's one of those things where imagine you could win an event with Yosenju, you'd make a name for yourself for sure. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more Yu-Gi-Oh content. Thank you guys all for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. So with that, Spanko signing out. Peace. G.